Welcome back everyone. In this video I'll be showing you how to change the front and rear deck LEDs on the Apollo Explorer or Ghost. The tools needed for this job are a battery drill, a hot glue gun, some electrical tape, a 2.5mm bit, some zip ties, a terminal extractor, a 5 and a 2.5mm Allen key, a flush cutter, an X-Acto knife, adjustable pliers, and a Phillips head screwdriver. Now the first step in the process will be to remove the grip tape. So we're going to take an X-Acto knife and gently lift our grip tape off of the deck and then pull it away gently to not rip the grip tape up. Now as this grip tape has some holes in it, we'll be changing it, but as much as possible we want to keep the same grip tapes on the scooters for as long as possible. There we go. Now we can just take some towels and remove the dust and grime to not get any of that into the deck. And we can now open our deck. We can now take our 2.5mm bit and remove our deck screws. And for the last screw, we're going to use our Allen key because we cannot directly access the screw with our drill. Just like that. Now for the deck plate, we just need a flat tool to pry it out. So in this case, I'm going to use a flathead screwdriver. And just like that, we have access to the scooter's deck. The next thing we'll do is remove the foam right here. So I'm just going to take my Allen key and prop it out just like that so we can have access to the controller and wires. The next step is to disconnect our battery and remove it from the deck to have more workspace and just to be overall safer. We can then pull our charging ports just like this, and we can now remove our battery from the deck. Just like that. We can now tuck our two charging ports into the hole just to have more workspace and get them out the way, just like that. And we can then remove the light box right here and pull the controller out just like this. We can now take our Phillips screwdriver and remove our 4 top screws. Now let's go on the underside and remove the screws there. Now we have 2 screws on the side of the deck and 3 at the bottom. So we'll start with the 2 on the side. That is 1 and 2. We can then remove the 3 screws at the bottom. And there we go. Now, as you may know, to remove the brake line, we're going to take our 5mm Allen key and unscrew the caliper right here. We can also take the little cover off so that our brake line can flow through. So we can simply pull our brake line out of the caliper and push it through the deck, and we'll go on the other side to pull it all the way. So now we can gently pull the rest of our line out and let it hang for now. Now the next step will be to take the front cover off the deck, just like this, but don't pull too hard because all the cables pass through right here. Now for the purpose of this video, we'll be removing this LED, but the process is the same on both. So first we want to trace our wire to see where our connector is. So as we can see right here. Now that we have found our connector, we can take flush cutters and cut the zip tie, just like this, to then disconnect our light from the light box. We can now gently pull the wire out of our deck, just like this, and proceed to removing the LED from the cover. We can now take the same flush cutters and remove the hot glue holding the nut. Just going to take my screwdriver to push the rest out, just like that, and we can do the same thing on the bottom. And just like that, our nut should be free to remove. And for that, I'm going to use adjustable pliers. This one shouldn't be too tight, so a turn or two should set it free. So now that our nut is free, which is a good thing, we now have to de-pin our connector, and then we can remove the light from the fender. So for this, we're just going to take our terminal extractor to take both pins out. That is one. And there we go. We can now remove the nut from our wire. And the last step here will be to remove the 2 screws on the tray or the cover to remove the light cover on the front. That's 1, and that's 2. We can now see that the light cover has popped off and our LED can be pulled out. We can now take our new LED and insert the wires into the cover and gently pull it all the way in, just like this. We can now take our nut and insert it. We can now screw our nut in. We can now take our pliers and make sure we have the LED screwed in tight. That should do it, and we can now install the light cover. So for this, we're going to hold the light cover with our hand on the other side of the cover and screw our 2 screws in on this side. That's 1. And that's 2. We can now proceed to put some hot glue to seal the nut. We can now take our hot glue gun and apply some around the nut here. That should do it. And we can just let that dry for now. Now we will reconnect our terminals to the connector. So we want to go black to the right, just like this, and red to the left. We can now take our terminal extractor and gently push to make sure our terminals are in place. If we pull, we can see they are indeed locked in place. We can now take our light wire and insert it back into the deck, just like this, and reconnect it to the light box, just like that. We can now take a zip tie and pass it in between our 2 cables, just like this, and same thing on the other side to secure the connector in place. That should do it. We can now cut the excess with our flush cutters, and our new LED is now secured in place. Now to remove the rear deck cover, we have 4 screws, the 2 on top, the 1 on the side, and 1 on the bottom. So we're going to start by removing the 2 on top. There we go. Next up, we can remove the 1 on the side, just like that. And lastly, the 1 on the bottom, just like this. We can now gently pull the cover off to free up the light right here. So we can now trace our LED wire. So we can see this is our wire, and we can trace it to this connector right here. So we can take our flush cutters and cut the zip tie, just like this, and pull the connector out. We can then gently pull the wire out of the deck, just like this, and we can then pull from the back and take it all the way out. And we now have our deck cover and light apart from the scooter. Now that the deck cover is free, we can take our flush cutters and remove the hot glue on the LED. We can now take our adjustable pliers and remove the nut to free the LED. Just like this. Now that the nut is free, we can remove the terminals from the connector with our terminal extractor. So we're now going to take our terminal extractor to de-pin our 2 terminals. That's 1 and 2. Let's keep this for later. We can now remove the nut and put it aside. Now the last step will be to remove the 2 screws on the cover. And there we go. We can now take the light cover off and remove the LED. With our new LED, we can now reinstall it into the deck cover. We can now pass our LED wires into the deck cover and install the light just like this. We can now take our nut and reinstall it onto the LED. We can then tighten it with our pliers. That should do it. We can now take our light cover and install it in its proper place. So once we have it positioned here, we can take our screws and screw them back in. That should be good. We can now take our hot glue gun and seal the LED. Now while the glue gun heats up, we will reinstall our connector. So as always, we want the black wire on the right side and the red wire on the left side. So we can insert them just like this. And as always, we can take our terminal extractor to gently push them in. As we can see, they're locked in, and we can now take our hot glue gun and layer it on to seal the LED in place. That's perfect. We're going to let that dry for now. Now a neat trick when reinserting the wire into the deck is to take an old wire and tape it to the connector to fish it out without damaging the connector itself. Just like this. And we can pull. We can now remove the tape and put the wire away. We can now relieve all the tension from the wire make sure to insert the power cable into the slot, and we can push our cover back on the deck. Just like that. We can now screw it back in. And always remember, the silver screws are for the bottom of the deck. And now for the last one. And there we go. Our rear deck cover is now secure. We can now feed the LED wire back into the deck and reconnect it to the light box right here. We can now take a zip tie and secure the connectors together. Just like this, and we can cut the excess off. We can now put our front cover back on, but make sure the cables for the LED strips are tucked into the deck and not hanging down. So we can now push this in place, and just like this, our deck cover is back on. We can now reinsert our brake line. The process to reinsert the brake line is fairly simple. We gently feed it through the deck and out the back. So let's go to the back and pull it all the way out. We can now pull the rest of our brake line out and insert it into the caliper. That should do it. We can now just roughly adjust the caliper. And there we go. We can now screw our deck cover screws back in. We're now going to do the other side right here. And sometimes you will have to push on the deck cover to get it in the right place. We're now going to insert our 3 silver bottom screws. That is one. Now these often come cross-threaded, so try to reinsert them the same way they came out. We can now take our side screw and insert it back into the deck. There we go. Now let's head to the other side and finish screwing the screws. There we go. And for the last screw on the side here, just like that. Now our deck is completely secure. Now before we start closing everything up, we're going to take our battery, connect it to the controller, and make sure everything works. There we go. We can now turn the scooter on, turn the lights on. As we can see, both of our LEDs in the front work and both of our LEDs in the back work. We're going to test our brake sensors. They do work. And obviously, because the display is on, the COM cable is operational. We can even test the motor, and it works fine. So now that we know everything works, we can unplug the battery. We can now take our controller and put it back in its primary spot, right there. We can then insert all of the wires where they were at the beginning, and the same thing with the light box. Now these wires don't need to be exactly as they were, but we need to leave enough space for the battery before we do the rest. So we can now reinsert our battery into our deck, just like this. And if you remember at the start, we tucked our 2 charging ports into the hole. We will now take them out. And reconnect them. That's 1, 2, and finally our battery cable. It's normal to spark when you're reconnecting the power cable, so don't be alarmed if it does spark. We can now finish reinserting all of our wires. And this right here should do it. Now the big foam piece that was here before is not absolutely needed, but it is recommended that if you can fit it back in its place, we do. So we're at least going to put this in here to stop the controller from moving up and down. Now before we put the deck plate back on, we want to make sure our gasket is still on the deck. As we can see, we had no need to remove it, and that all the cables are inside the deck and not in between the deck plate and the gasket. So we can now put the deck plate in position and screw it back in. Now I am using a battery drill to put the screws back in, but we do not want to strip them, so this is strictly to get them in place, and we'll tighten them with our Allen key after. And the last one, of course, is in between the folding mechanism, which we can't reach with our drill. That's good. We can tighten all of them with our Allen key. That's perfect. Now the last step is to reinstall our grip tape. Now for the purpose of this video, we're going to be installing a new grip tape, but in general, we try to reuse our grip tapes as much as possible unless it is torn or unusable. So the first step will be to flip it over and remove the protective film. For this, I'll just take an X-Acto knife and separate the film from the grip. Now installing a grip tape is a job best done by 2 people, but you can do it alone. Just like this. We want to make sure there are no air bubbles, and we want to press it down to make sure it sticks. That's perfect. And that's how you change the front and rear deck LEDs on the Apollo Explorer or Ghost.